It's hard to imagine that now because we're so far removed from it that it's almost hard to just that I want to be number one. Little did I know that I would, 100%. I think sports has always been on the front of social change and social progress.
Stunned. That is the only word for what Martina Navratilova's face communicated when she saw what Alexa just did on centre court in Dubai. What a beautiful drop shot that was. She has won 18 Grand Slam singles titles and spent 5 decades watching professional tennis at the closest possible range. Nothing about Tuesday night in Dubai sat easily with her. Here is what actually happened. A 20-year-old from the Philippines, ranked 47th in the world, walked onto centre court, faced the reigning tournament champion and world number 8 Jasmine Pauwini, and took the opening set 6-1 with a ruthlessness that left the crowd struggling to process what they were watching. Then, with 3 match points in hand and all of them gone, she didn't spiral. She steadied herself, and when the tie-break arrived, she closed it out to win the match in 100 minutes. It was her 3rd career top 10 win and the first time a Filipino player had ever reached the Dubai round of 16, sealed in front of a capacity crowd that never once went quiet. That result was only the beginning. What followed over the next 24 hours turned a brilliant performance into something far harder to contain. The scheduling controversy that had been building since January finally broke into the open. Fans revolted loudly enough to force a response, and 2 of the most decorated champions in the sport's history went on live television to demand answers about whether the WTA's own structures are failing one of its most valuable young stars. Navratilova has been watching this unfold for months. Tuesday night in Dubai pushed her past the point of quiet concern. Hit subscribe if you're new here because this goes much deeper than one match result. Here is exactly how 24 hours changed everything. Eala's first round match at Melbourne Park in 2026 was scheduled on Court 6, a mid-sized venue with nowhere near the capacity to accommodate what arrived before the first ball was struck. The queues outside stretched back through the grounds. Hundreds of Filipino fans, many of whom had travelled significant distances, never made it through the doors. Those who couldn't get in settled for big screens outside, which were also packed. Tennis journalist Jose Morgado said publicly that putting Eala on Court 6 was simply dumb. Ben Rothenberg, one of the most respected voices in the sport, said the court placement was one of his first concerns when he looked at the order of play that morning. What made the chaos more significant was what followed. In a post-match discussion on Tennis Channel, Navratilova and Lindsay Davenport, between them holders of more than 20 Grand Slam singles titles, weighed in directly. Davenport was unambiguous. Eala probably needed to be on a bigger show court. She pointed out that IA is arguably the most famous female athlete in Philippine sporting history and that the crowd she generates were entirely predictable to anyone paying attention. Navratilova went further, addressing tournament directors directly. The organizers need to keep more in mind where the players are from and what the actual fan base is. She said there's a massive Filipino audience in Melbourne in Australia, so keep that in mind next time you make the schedule. Those comments didn't come from fringe observers. They came from 2 of the most decorated champions the sport has ever produced, speaking on a major broadcast platform about a pattern they considered impossible to ignore. And for Eala supporters, who had been raising the scheduling issue throughout 2025 with limited mainstream acknowledgement, hearing Navratilova say it out loud felt like validation they had been waiting for. The conversation didn't die after Melbourne. It intensified. When Eala arrived in Dubai for the 2026 Dubai Duty-Free Tennis Championships, it carried a specific charge. Tournament directors, under sustained pressure from fans and commentators alike, finally made a decision that acknowledged the obvious scheduling. Eala last on centre court for the night session on February 17th, the most coveted slot in the tournament's daily program. It was by any measure the right call, but it had taken months of noise to get there. The opponent waiting for Eala on centre court was not a soft draw designed to showcase a rising star. Jasmine Pauwini is a former Dubai champion, a 2-time Grand Slam finalist, and at the time of the match, the world number 8. She entered as the clear favourite. Most analysts expected her to manage the occasion and move through without serious trouble. Eala had other plans. The opening set was almost startling in its authority. Eala broke Pauwini twice in quick succession, raced to a 5-1 lead, and served out the set in just 25 minutes. She landed 67% of first serves in that set and won 86% of those points. Numbers that are notable for any player, but particularly striking for Eala, whose serve has historically been the most scrutinized part of her game. Pauwini, the reigning champion on this very court 2 years earlier, did not earn a single breakpoint opportunity in the entire opening set. 7 unforced errors from the Italian didn't help her cause, but the credit belonged to the pressure generated with her aggressive counter-punching and precise forehand placement. The second set was a different story. Eala built a 5-3 lead and appeared to be coasting toward a comfortable straight sets result. Then Polini, showing the resilience that had taken her to 2 Grand Slam finals, found another gear. She saved 3 match points, broke Eala as she served for the match, and leveled at 5-all. For a brief moment, the momentum had shifted entirely. This is where the performance revealed something beyond shot quality. A younger or less mentally settled player would have felt that moment as a collapse. Eala reset. She held serve, forced a tie-break, and then played some of the best tennis of the night. When it mattered most. The tie-break itself was extraordinary. The first 8 points each ended with a winner from one player or the other. At 4-4, Eala composed herself at the changeover, looked up at a stadium packed almost entirely with Filipino supporters, and later said she thought about how many of them were probably praying for her at that exact moment. She converted her 5th match point to win 75 in the tiebreak and closed out a 61,765 victory in 1 hour and 40 minutes. The reaction inside the 5,000 capacity venue was immediate and overwhelming. Outside in the tennis village, fans who couldn't fit inside had gathered around screens surrounded by Philippine flags and handmade signs reading "Lean Alex. Fight Alex." When the match ended, the noise from both inside and outside the stadium merged into something that reportedly carried well beyond the venue grounds. "I think today I came out on fire," Eala said in her post-match interview. It was even by her own standards an understatement. Navratilova's response to the Paolini win wasn't a polite acknowledgement of a decent result. It was the reaction of someone who had spent months arguing that Eala deserved better treatment from tournament officials and who was now watching the young player justify every word of that argument in real time. The context matters here. Navratilova's January comments at the Australian Open weren't made in isolation. She had been following Ayala's trajectory closely enough to recognize the specific absurdity of placing a player with her commercial drawing power on courts that physically couldn't contain the crowd she attracted. The Paolini result on centre court in Dubai was the direct counter-argument to every scheduling decision that had relegated Eala to outer courts across the previous 12 months. It said clearly and without ambiguity that when you give this player the right stage, she doesn't just fill it, she commands it. For the WTA Tour, the implications extend beyond one tournament. Eala's post-match press conference livestream at the Australian Open drew more than 100,000 viewers on the day, surpassing those of Aryna Sabalenka and Carlos Alcaraz on the same day. In Dubai, former players Sam Kerr and Steve Johnson discussed on the Nothing Major podcast whether Eala had become the biggest draw in women's tennis outright, bigger than Sabalenka and Coco Gauff. Johnson's answer was an unqualified yes. The Filipino community numbers more than 110 million people globally, and wherever I competes, a significant portion of them mobilize in ways the sport has rarely seen outside of Naomi Osaka at her peak. What Navratilova understood and what the Paolini result crystallized is that the scheduling question was never really about logistics. It was about whether the establishment was prepared to treat an Asian player from a non-traditional tennis nation with the same commercial seriousness it applies to players from Europe and North America. The answer for too long appeared to be no. Dubai on February 17th was the first real sign that pressure sustained and loud enough could change that. Eala followed the Paolini win with a 75-64 victory over Syria in the third round to reach the quarterfinals. Her first WTA 1000 quarterfinal in Dubai and only the second of her career. She then faced Coco Gauff, world number 4, in a match that carried its own weight of narrative. Gauff is a 2-time Grand Slam champion, an American star accustomed to the sport's biggest stages, and was coming off a match in which she had hit 16 double faults and barely survived against Elise Mertens. She was going into the quarterfinal visibly vulnerable. The result didn't Gauff's way. Gauff won 6-0, 6-2 in just over an hour, with Eala cutting a tired figure throughout. The Filipina had played just 4 hours and 15 minutes of tennis across her earlier rounds. Actually less than Gauff's 3 hours and 50 minutes, but arrived in the quarterfinal looking fatigued in a way that raised questions about physical conditioning rather than match load. Her serve, which had functioned so well against Paolini, fell apart. She won only 32% of points behind her first serve and 40% on second serves. Numbers that are not workable at this level. Gauff, to her credit, acknowledged after the match exactly what the occasion meant beyond the scoreline. "I know you were mostly supporting Alex," she told the crowd, "but I have to say it is great to be on a crowded court. Whenever you guys were cheering for Alex, I was pretending that it was my name." It was a gracious read of a genuinely unusual atmosphere, and it said something about how clearly even IA's opponents understand the size of what is building around her. The defeat doesn't diminish what the previous 24 hours represented. Eala is 20 years old, ranked 47th in the world, and has now recorded 3 career wins against top 10 players. She reached the last 8 of AWTA 1000 event for the second time in her career. She did it on center court in the main event slot in front of thousands of people who had flown from across the world to watch her play. And she did it in a way that justified every word Martina Navratilova had said about her since January. The physical conditioning concerns are real and worth addressing. The clay season ahead represents a genuine challenge for a player whose results on the surface have been limited, but none of that changes the trajectory this week in Dubai confirmed. The sport has a phenomenon on its hands, and the 24 hours following that Pawini win made it impossible for anyone still paying attention to pretend otherwise. If you want to follow where this story goes next, Indian Wells, the clay swing, and whatever does when the pressure keeps rising, subscribe and stay with us because this one is only getting started. Drop your take in the comments. After everything that happened in Dubai, is Alex Eala the most exciting player in women's tennis right?